again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Alpharetta Tech Talk. I'm John Ray, your host, and folks know we're not back in our normal studio home inside Renaissance Bank on Windward Parkway, but we're looking forward to that day one day soon in a hopefully a better time. In the meantime, the folks at Renaissance are working hard on the second round PPP loans, and you will I think be happy if you're looking for a better relationship for your business that you with a bank. You'll be happy by going to Renaissance. They don't have 1-800 numbers that they force clients to call or automated voices that are always answering phones. They've got like normal voicemail, and you can call one of their local offices and talk to a real person. So that's what I suggest you do. Go to renaissancebank.com, find their local office, some 200 across the South, ready to serve you, and give them a call. And I think you'll find what I and a lot of the folks I work with know, that Renaissance is big enough to serve just about any need you can throw at them, small enough to do it in a personal way. Renaissance Bank, understanding you, member FDIC. And now I want to welcome Rick Murphy. And Rick is managing partner, CEO, and he's a transaction therapist, and we're going to talk more about what that means, with Cogent Growth Partners. Rick, welcome to the show.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So let's talk about you and Cogent Growth Partners, how you serve in the market out there.
So we are 11 years old last week, actually, buy-side intermediary advisory service company in the IT services space. So we help IT companies find and purchase other IT companies.
You have you are a lesson. And let's talk briefly to folks out there that start a business and they have too wide of a niche. I mean, you've created a niche for yourself that's pretty unique, right?
Yeah. In the beginning, when we started the company back in 2010, the IT space is a really fragmented space. IT services, as everybody knows, certainly from what happened even in COVID recently, is an essential industry now. I think it always has been. We always thought so. And, your computers have to work and your phones has to work and everything has to connect together, and your business networks, and being able to have work from home was a new thing, back at the early part of last year when all the pandemic hit, and it just really sort of proved our point originally that, IT services business are what, the glue of what keeps companies running, especially nowadays. And has been for, I think, a long time. And, there's a lot of companies that provide these services all over the world, certainly here in the United States. And when I first looked at this space with my first client, it just became readily apparent that people really didn't know how to acquire companies. And we've set out to help them. And it's worked out really well. And we can get more into that as we talk.
Yeah, let's talk about the IT services space in general, and then we can talk about how you address the market. So it's, as you say, it's a very fragmented space. I've heard, and this, you can correct me if I'm heard something wrong, but I've heard there are more IT services providers in the metropolitan Atlanta area than there are Waffle Houses. Which I
think that's probably true, actually.
Yeah. So, talk about this space and I guess what's going on generally with IT services providers.
So short story, right? So back in the day, decades ago, when computers started first working and, personal computers started happening in the early 90s, certainly got stronger in the mid 90s and so forth. It used to be that companies, all of the computers were very complex, large, physically large, expensive. Networking was expensive and something you had to do physically. And they had internal IT people, information technology, for those of you who don't know what IT stands for. They had their own information technology groups inside their company. Pick a television network or an advertising agency or a law office or a CPA firm or whatever type of business, even a bakery, whatever type of business you had, especially the larger the business, when they started using more computers to run their businesses for logistics and other things in the beginning, they had internal IT people. Mm-hmm. And as time has passed, it's very expensive for smaller companies, especially small businesses, to have internal IT people on staff is really costly, especially as the equipment and the networking and so forth has gotten to be more reliable. Stuff doesn't break like it used to, happily. It ages out. You need to refresh to get smarter, better chips and things like that, and faster computers and so forth, and more storage and what have you. But because it's become so much more reliable, it's sort of obsoleted the internal IT staff. So gradually through the 90s and in the first, early part of this century, in the aughts, I think people call it, in the first decade, it's been more and more of a trend to be able to use outsourced IT service companies. And a lot of the people that were in-house IT people formed their own companies to service their former employer. That's how a lot of this started, actually. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then it's just grown from there. So you're not wrong. Depending on who you want to listen to, there's somewhere north of 30,000-ish IT services companies in the United States. All of the big cities have hundreds, if not thousands, of different sizes with different specialties to service different types of clientele. You can kind of put it into, the small and mid-sized business market, the mid-sized business market, the enterprise business market. So there's echelons of what people do and how they do it, and then the types of vendors that they use relative to what they service for their clientele. So a huge company with thousands of employees might be on an SAP system or other types of large company systems, where, smaller companies running QuickBooks and they're running Salesforce and Microsoft Outlook and things like that, but they still need to be able to protect their data. They still need to be able to have people work remotely. They have their own systems and things like that. So there's still networking and other things that have to happen. And then, occasionally you got to buy some new stuff. So that's what the IT services space is all about. And yeah, that's a general overview.
So you're a buy-side representative for IT services firms, which means you represent IT services providers who want to buy other similar companies.
That's right. Well, people used to say what I do for a living. I used to say I was in the M&A space, in IT, and they go, huh? And so I finally just started telling people, I help IT companies buy other IT companies. They go, oh, that sounds interesting. So I realized along, when we first started the company that, there's business brokers that, help sellers auction their company when they're ready to sell. And the broker business industry has been around for way before I was born. But you'll be helping a buyer be able to identify, a good candidate company that's hopefully a good fit with their company, and then help that transaction happen and get done. There's virtually nobody doing that, and that's what we do for a living. So we really, we'll get back into the transaction therapy part, but the idea is it's acquiring a company is a faster way to grow the company if you make good decisions around why you're doing it in the first place. A lot of what we focus on is the why behind doing a transaction. A lot of people forget about that or don't even think about that until it's too late. A lot of people are focused on money. They put all the money ideas first and think about financials. We actually put opportunity first. Why should you do it at all? Why does this make sense? Why should we put these two companies together? Mm-hmm. And it's a great way to acquire talent. Almost every deal we do is really a talent acquisition if you think about it. It's not really about the money. It's not buying a book of business and adding that to your business. You've got talented technicians, you've got talented salespeople, talented operators, network designers, all kinds of different things in terms of the talent pool. And all the good people are employed, right? So it's a great way to grow a business and grow the talent pool of your business and your executive suite and everything else, and grow the financial part of the business as well. So we're focused on that.
A lot there. But one of the things that we talked about before we came on the air was how so many M&A advisory firms generally, I'm talking about that go beyond just the IT services space, but just in general, kind of more or less exclusively focus on sell side transactions. In other words, representing the seller. And why is it that you see it's so important to be a representative of a buyer?
So it's interesting that you said that, right?
Yeah.
So the sell side brokerage universe has been around for a long, long time. And when you have a business, it's likely you haven't sold one before, and you need help trying to figure out, what to do, who to sell it to. They don't have a Rolodex. They can just call up Bob and say, "Hey, Bob, I want to sell my company to you." And brokers, do a good job helping people who've decided to sell their company. And there's a lot of different ways that happens. They tend to run what they call a process, and they basically auction the company and put the information together for that company. It's called a SIM, a confidential information memorandum. They'll put together a SIM. They'll market the company to potential buyers, and then take bids and work through that process. Mm-hmm. So when the seller is being represented, but are you really finding the right buyer? Is it really about culture fit? Is it really about all the things that matter to your employees when they become an employee of a new company? We actually work for both sides. Even though the buyer pays us, we actually do a lot of work for we call them candidate companies. Others might call them targets. We think that's rude. A candidate company is really looking for a really good home for their employees. They're looking for a good place for their customers. They've been working with these customers for years. And finding a good home for their customers is really important. So we think that the way we do it, representing the buyers, helps us create a relationship between companies before they get married. We liken this all to sort of a marriage process. Before they get married, you've got a chance to really work on the relationship and make sure this is a good fit. And then, if all those things fall into place, usually we can make the money work as long as either side's not a little crazy, which is why we get a lot of stuff done.
Right.
Make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, it makes perfect sense. It's interesting though it sounds like what you've developed is relationships with buyers that are really interested in growing in a smart way, versus, and I'm not trying to throw shade on anybody's business, but there's by definition, a sell side advisory firm is interested in one-off transactions. And so you've got a really different model just as a business model, right?
Right. So, we tend to work for and or help create serial acquirers. Once you can do it successfully and have happy participants on both sides, one of the things with us is when we're done with a transaction, we still know the seller really well. And we still, because they've become a seller and they were bought by our client, and we still know our buyer really well. And usually our buyers are trying to do another transaction. And we're working on a transaction right now. It's deal number 13 and deal number 14 for a client we've had for 8 years now, and help them grow their company immensely. And again, the people, most, if not, well, not all, but certainly most of the employees of those companies are still with the company. It's hard to grow a company one client at a time, one employee at a time, and you're never quite sure what you're going to get. Whereas if you can analyze and look at a potential candidate company and see that there's a good fit, you can really, exponentially grow a company much more rapidly, and also with much more sort of assured success. You already know that the salespeople can sell. You already know that the techs are good techs. You already know the customer base. So it's not, it's trying to make that all function and, give enough value to the potential seller to make them want to do a transaction happily so, and, and keeping enough money on the table for the buyer to make sure it's a good business decision for the buyer. That's something we share with our clients and our candidates right from our first phone call.
Folks, we're here chatting with Rick Murphy, and he is with Cogent Growth Partners. He's CEO and managing partner there, and he's also a transaction therapist. And I love that term. And I guess my next question is kind of getting into that. So talk about how you work with your clients who are looking to acquire. I mean, how does that relationship unfold? And how yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, they reach out to us. We do some outreach as well, looking for new clients when it's time to bring new clients on. And we actually did an onboarding call just yesterday with a new client, actually from Denmark, looking to grow here in the United States. And, the idea is developing sort of the rationale with the client and what their approach to doing a transaction is. We're very careful about vetting our customers, our clients, making sure that they have the wherewithal to do the transaction. We're not an investment banker. We don't raise money. We don't go out and look for debt money or, raise equity money for our clients. We work for well-heeled clients that have their own resources or banking resources readily available, strong businesses that have a strong balance sheet, that have a good P&L, cash management, strong free cash flow on their own, so that they can be a viable suitor. And then it's about attitude. We want to work for intelligent people that care. This is not just a numbers business. Again, you're talking about people's lives. The sellers are, hopefully getting enough benefit from this to be meaningful in changing their lives forward and their families' lives. And we're cognizant of that. And, it's a really big part of it. Most of my staff is from the IT services industry. I've got 3 former IT company owners on our staff. And everybody else used to work in an IT company. So the idea being is we understand the space really well. So specializing really helps. You hinted at that before. But the therapy part is really saying, okay, you got to have the right attitude. You got to be nice. This isn't a war. We liken it to a marriage process. You're dating, you start dating, and you decide to get engaged. That's sort of the letter of intent. Okay, let's go. And then, you're on your way to getting married. And, it's not like buying a house. So it's like, you're trying to have this war around the price point and everybody's trying to beat each other up. It's the opposite. So the therapy part is on both sides too. So, obviously the sellers, once they decide to sell or on the way to deciding to sell, so, they start out as a candidate because they're not really ready to sell. They weren't really thinking about selling. God, gee whiz, this seems like a really great opportunity. So, golly, folks, now I'm actually seriously considering this. So now it's getting serious. And, it's the constant phone calls with all the different candidates we work with and all the different clients we work with. Are we making the right decision? Are we missing anything? And just working through them through all the psychological processes they go through, finally make up their mind to do something. And even after they make up their mind, along the way, different advisors and lawyers and CPAs and whoever that they know are telling them all kinds of different stuff because everybody expects that being in this situation creates this adversarial relationship. And we spend a lot of our time doing the opposite and making sure people understand it's not an adversarial relationship. This is not a fight. It's trying to bring people together with a common purpose. And so that's what we do for a living. And that's where the transaction therapy was born. I kept telling people, I'll do a lot of therapy work, and they laughed at it. So I finally coined the term transaction therapist. It's a made up term, but every time I say it to one of my candidates or one of our clients, they laugh pretty well. So it's intended to be lighthearted, but it's actually what we do for a living also.
Well, it's a knowing laugh because it's a real issue, right? I mean,
exactly.
Yeah. So it makes sense.
Exactly.
That it makes sense. So,
especially once you're through the process a little bit, or you've done it before, it makes a lot more sense. So some people, have maybe bought or sold a business, or they bought or sold a building or something like that. So they give that knowing chuckle, going, "Yeah, I get it."
So let's talk a little bit about. I guess how you walk your clients through that process in terms of they identify potential partners, we'll call them, not targets. I heard what you said earlier. They identify partners, and I guess you really help with that process, right?
Yeah, I can walk you through that. So, so we have, we're 10 people in 6 states. We've been a virtual office company since day one. We were 11 years old last week, February 10th. It's our 11th anniversary.
Congratulations.
We've done over somewhere around 140 closed IT services transactions, give or take one or two, still recounting from the beginning. We've helped a lot of people doing that. And so what we do is we have a full-time outreach crew. We have 3 people in our outreach group with lots of tools and data at their disposal. And they are the front tip of the spear, if you will, helping us contact and reach potential candidate companies. And that's what I spend their day doing. My 2 partners and myself, Bruce and George, my 2 partners, one here in Atlanta, my other partners in New Jersey. They and I take what we call discovery calls with the candidate companies and meet and greet them and talk to them and listen and see if there's an opportunity. Again, why, using the whole why phrase. Should we introduce you to one of our clients and vice versa? And we do the same thing with our clients. So that's the discovery process and meeting a company. Once we get them introduced and they start talking, it's really important to be able to do the initial due diligence to make intelligent decisions instead of just knee-jerking around money or EBITDA issues or what have you, which a lot of people do. First thing I think about and talk about is money and price point and multiples. And we go, our motto, mantra, if you will, is opportunity first, money last. Talk about why should you do this at all. So we coach them through that process. And along the way, once they're comfortable, we have a proprietary financial modeling system. We call it our transaction analysis model that we've been developing since day one in the company. And it's constantly morphing and improving. Actually got a compliment from a client the other day around that. They hadn't been with us for a while and saw the new improved model and gave us a bunch of compliments. It's kind of nice to have.
Yep.
So we do a lot of intensive is the wrong word, granular due diligence and protecting the information of our candidate companies. So we redact all the customer names, we redact all the employee names and information, but we know their title and what they get paid and so forth. And we know what kind of client it is and generally where they are in terms of being able to share that information early with our buyer, but we're protecting the candidate's information from day one. And it's all about building trust between the buyer and the seller or potential seller. And so our modeling helps us be very granular with the potential seller, our candidate company, understanding their business, soup to nuts. You'll see what they look like. They get to see what they look like in the mirror. We share the model with them and walk through the whole bits and pieces of their company that they've probably never seen this way before. I guarantee you they've never seen their company this way before. And they see that what their company looks like. And it also helps us underpin rationale for how we might structure a transaction. So it helps us deal with structure and so forth. So by the time we get to doing a letter of intent, which is really so that engagement, we're getting engaged to be married. And and that's where the purchase price and the structure have to be outlined and people need to agree to it. We've done a significant amount of due diligence before that. And we have a plus 90%, LOI to close ratio as a result of that, preliminary work. And then once the preliminary work is done and people agreed, we're not a law firm, we're not a CPA firm, but we do and are able to draft transaction paperwork. Each side has to get their own lawyer at that point. But we work in between the lawyers, drafting the paper because we know how the movie ends. We've done so many transactions in the space. We have all the IT stuff in there about the IT companies, and we speak IT and what have you, so that the transaction paperwork is salient and prescient and functional and pretty neutral with a little draw to the buyer. So we're not trying to have a document war. So we actually handle that to the degree our clients let us do that, and most of them do. And then once that's done, we start doing all the actual due diligence, and that's actually where we continue to help the candidate company who's now become a seller We actually help them get through the whole process. Unlike just throwing this due diligence list, here's a 300-point due diligence list, go get this stuff done for us. They have a business to run. And often very few people inside their business know what's going on. So they've only got a couple of people, the CEO, maybe their financial person, maybe one or two other people, know what's happening because it's preliminary. Nothing's actually done yet. And they still have a business to run. And so we know that. And same thing with our client. They have a business to run. They can't be constantly doing all the M&A work. So we do all that grunt work, we call it, for both sides. And we actually help. We draft all the paperwork. We draft all the draft paperwork. We work on the schedules and exhibits that go with the agreements. We have a whole highly systematized process for tracking and project managing the transaction. Because at that point it has become a transaction. So we assign a project manager. We run the whole project through steps we've done, repeatable steps we've done time and time again. That's very well oiled. We call it the machine to get it done. But also you have to be personal. This is people. This is not just a robot. And so we're sensitive to people's timelines and what have you. So we're helping the candidate companies produce this material, which also helps us do the due diligence for our clients. We're doing double duty there, but it also helps the now seller get through the process with their easily. And we get a lot of people thanking us after the fact. Gosh, Murph, I can't imagine having done this without you. We did it with you this time, especially for first timers. And oftentimes, the seller's going to work for the buyer, so we still know them after the fact. That's where a lot of our good references come from. So that's what makes us unique. It's one of our value props that I think really separates us from everybody else and helps us get a lot of stuff done. So we do somewhere between a dozen and a dozen and a half deals every year.
Wow.
And yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. But Rick, what I'm hearing here that I find very interesting is that you're working. You essentially get paid by the buyer, but you're really in doing work on their behalf. You're doing a lot to cultivate a relationship with the seller.
Absolutely.
And ahead of time, and it really making it as much about them as to begin with, certainly, and trying to help be of assistance to them. And by assisting them, you're much more successful in getting transactions completed. That's what I'm hearing.
That's right. That's exactly right. We can take because of the way we do what we do, typically we can take a transaction from a signed letter of intent to closing 8 to 10 weeks.
Wow.
12 weeks on the outside. Which if anybody listening knows what that's like, usually it's 90 days to 120 days or longer.
All right.
And, some take even longer than that. And doing that, it just helps everybody get back to business. I mean, it sounds selfish. Obviously we get paid quicker, but it's not about that. It's about, getting the deal done so everybody can stop doing deal stuff and work on the company.
Sure.
And the longer it drags out, and it just becomes tedious and time consuming, and do we really have enough time? And everybody's like, well, why am I doing this? And again, the therapy part comes back around on that. And so we just, we know that better, that and from our experience, that, getting in, making the decision, making sure it's the right decision for everybody, and getting it done helps everybody get back to what they're supposed to be doing every day.
Right.
And our work product allows them to continue working on their company while it's happening. So they don't have, the buyer doesn't have to be in the M&A business. We're their outsourced development group. And the seller doesn't have to be in the M&A business and hire a phalanx of people to help them because we do a lot of the grunt work for them.
Sure.
And like I said, we're still going to know them. So, we're making new friends and millionaires.
Right. Right. Let's talk about, I've got one question here that I better ask because I know folks that are in this industry that are listening to this always have questions about this is valuations. Talk about valuations, how they've changed here, certainly in a pandemic, and then the turmoil we've seen in the last year generally.
So interesting question. If I bounce around a little bit, keep me on track, but I think that there was a lot of speculation back. Let's flash back a year.
Mm-hmm.
It's February last year. COVID's in the news. The pandemic starts becoming a pandemic. We honestly, we had a whole bunch of our customers calling, going, man, should we stop M&A? Should we just put this all on pause till everything dies down? And interestingly enough, and I may be serendipity, but we had already made up our minds coming out of the previous year that we were going to put the foot on the gas of our marketing efforts and our outreach marketing efforts. And we had already started that in the previous November, December period. And we're hard at it in January, February. We had a bunch of stuff going on. And then what happened is in the IT space, I think it's true for a lot, in the whole world, but specifically in the IT space, you suddenly have companies that aren't used to working remotely, outside of an office, having to move to, remote workers. So all of our clientele, or wannabe clientele, were busy running around with their hair on fire, trying to do their own, work from home environment.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of their customers were having the same issue. All of their customers had to rush and do a work from home environment. But interestingly enough, it involves moving the IT from one place to another and being able to do stuff remotely, securely, and all kinds of other interesting things. And do I have enough equipment to do this? And Sally doesn't have a laptop and all those kind of things, right?
Right.
So actually, for most of the customers that we've talked to, almost all of them actually prospered last year. There was that sort of hair on fire period. Let's call it what? I guess it was probably April, May, or maybe March, April, May,
sure.
A little bit.
Right.
Where everybody's really busy focused on their own business. So there's a few transactions that we were working on at the time that got pushed later, but they did happen. So they did close. They just got delayed. There's a couple that probably didn't happen that could have, if we had a chance to have people meet face to face with each other as opposed to being on Zoom calls.
Right.
So that probably happened for us a little bit, but we actually had a really good year at the end of the year. A lot of happy transactions happened. And the IT space, as far as we could tell, I think grew in an interesting way, sort of like the Grinch grew in a bigger heart, right? And so a little bit more, less about money, a little bit more about people. And we've always been focused on that in our transactions. It's not about the money. It's about why. It's in the people and what's going to happen later and how does everybody benefit from this.
Sure.
So that's, enhanced our focus. And again, I think it just sort of proved that the IT services industry is an essential industry, as they're using the phrase now, as opposed to a nice to have.
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody realizes that, it's a must have. And I am helping grow companies to be bigger, better companies that can service their clients better. It's what we do.
I would love it, Rick, if you would share, and you don't obviously have to use names or anything, but if you would share maybe a success story, a client you've worked with that you've had a successful relationship with, and how that's turned out.
Gosh, there's a lot of them. If you visit our website, www.cogentmergers.com, shameless self-promotion, visit cogentmergers.com. You can see some testimonials for yourself. We're putting more up every day from the seller's perspective as well as from the buyer's perspective. So that's a place you can go and read about them. And certainly anybody can reach me if they wish. We'll get back to that at the end of the show.
Sure. But
we just closed a transaction as the final closing, if you will, just 2 weeks ago for a company that's headquartered actually out of South Africa that has offices in the New York metro area. And we closed a transaction with a New York metro, actually a Manhattan company, that we actually introduced to our clients over 2 years ago, just a little bit more than 2 years ago. And back in 2 years ago, boy, they liked each other, felt good. Nobody was really sure if they wanted to do it or not. Should we move forward or not? And it never kind of went to the LOI phase, but there's a lot of dating. And off and on, from the time we introduced them until probably September last year. So good, 18 months went by, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
They kept dating a little bit and they kept talking to each other and they did that on their own. And, we always spur that, but, they did a good job of just kind of keeping in touch. And there was a couple inflection points. One of the owners really decided he really wanted to move on and do something else. And the other owner says, I want to stay and be part of the team. And that's in fact what happened. We got the band back together, as it were. It's called August, September. And with a few fits and starts just from, just the industry and also banking, international banking, we got in the way a little bit, but we got through that as well.
Mm-hmm.
We're able to actually close that transaction just last week. And the one owner is a senior executive in the new company in charge of their Manhattan operation, their New York metro operation. So he got the position he wanted. The other owner, both of them called to thank me personally profusely, sent me very nice emails to our staff thanking us for helping them. And that's from the seller.
Wow.
Our buyers obviously also very thankful, but got a number of emails from various people on the sell side thanking us profusely for helping them through the process and helping get this done. And again, we get a lot of, gosh, I can't imagine doing this without you comments.
Wow.
So a really good success story. The company's a really good fit. All the employees are making the trip. It's a really good landing spot for the owner who wanted to exit. He's thrilled. And the owner that stayed, he's just completely jacked. He's now running a much bigger business. And it's really got him real excited.
It's interesting to hear you talk about this, and congratulations on that, because I know there are probably some M&A advisors. They get after the deal notes from parties to the transaction, but they're not ones you could read on the air, right? So it's great that you're getting those kudos from partners to a transaction that are across the table from your client, essentially. And that's, so congratulations on that.
It just underscores that this isn't a war. It's not supposed to be a war. People invent it that way. I think it's kind of to run up their bill, right? If you argue about every word in a document, why are you doing that? You don't have to. Why don't you just start with a document that everybody can say yes to? Or, it's close enough for horseshoes, and then work out any minutia details. That's how we roll. And we try to, our documentation, we try to be fairly neutral with a little draw to the buyer if you're a golfer, draw analogy, because they're writing the checks.
Sure.
But, we already know if we put this word in here, they're going to change it to that word. So why don't we just start with that word instead? Because they mean the same thing. So who cares? Right? And it's just a silly way to put that. But, we try to make it something where people can really go, it's not too bad. Well, okay. Because you don't want to have that document war. It's just going to cost everybody a bunch of money and take time. So that's our coaching. Our clients tend to listen, and those are the clients we like to work with. Clients who don't listen, we don't work for anymore. So, we're very careful with who we work with. And that was part of the original comment you meant, like, how do you bring on a client? And so we just make sure that they have similar ethics and morals that we do.
It's hard to argue with an 11-year track record of success. Rick Murphy with Cogent Growth Partners. Wow, this has been great. I could keep going, but I think what we need to do is let people call you or get in touch if they want more information. So let's tell them how they can do that.
Well, the easiest way for us is hit us at info@cogentmergers.com. If you want to email me personally, it's rick@cogentmergers.com. Info goes to me and my other two partners, so we can get back to you quickly. Happy to have a chat about whatever you want to chat about. You can hit our website, also at cogentmergers.com, and read about, see our blogs, read about what we do for a living. We've got a lot of information up there about, sell side. We got a lot of information on buy side. And we just like, helping companies get together.
Great work. Rick Murphy with Cogent Growth Partners. Rick, this has been awesome. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Folks, if you've got administrative tasks in your business that you need to get off your plate, that you're too busy working on little details that somebody else ought to be doing so you can work on some strategic directions for your business or work with clients, actually. If you need some help with bookkeeping or some other issues like that, here's my suggestion. Give Essie Escobedo over at Office Angels a call. She's got a whole team of angels that fly in, get the work done, and fly out. And they've been doing it for 20 years. So a pandemic environment does not scare them. They work virtually. They've been doing that for all this time. And they're terrific. And I know that personally because I run my business with Essie and her angels help. So give her a call and explain your problem. 770-442-9246. If you're timid, go to officeangels.us and check her out first. But my suggestion is give her a call and tell her I suggested you call and explain your problem, and she'll be glad to help. Essie Escobedo, Office Angels, 770-442-9246. And just a quick reminder, Alpharetta Tech Talk is on all the major social media platforms. We're part of the North Fulton Business RadioX studio. North Fulton BRX is the handle for all the social media platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, probably some other ones I don't know about. But North Fulton BRX is the term there. So go check us out, follow us. We would really appreciate it. If you would do that and give us a great review on your favorite podcast app. And that's not about us. It's about helping folks find the show so they can utilize the services of great folks like Rick Murphy and the other guests that we've had on the show over the years. So for my guest, Rick Murphy, I'm John Ray. Join us next time here on Alpharetta Tech Talk.